Well, the primary just a few days away and some change. We continue our conversation with various candidates for state office here in the state of Indiana. One particular race, in a contested primary down in House District 90, which is primarily Franklin Township. It's a contested race to replace Mike Speedy, who is running for Congress. And so join us in studio as one of those candidates, Mr. Andrew Ireland. So, Andrew, my friend, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So why are you running for public office? Don't you got anything else better to do? You're a young guy. Go out and party. Do what I did when I was your age.
I hear you. I do. And I'll tell you, I had no plan on doing this year, but I looked at the race and I didn't feel like any of the folks that were getting in were really focused on what, to me, are the two big issues of our time right now in this state. And that's one, getting crime in Indianapolis, our capital city, under control, and two, fixing our out-of-control property taxes. So I looked at the race and I said, well, if somebody else isn't going to do it, I better get in and do it myself. And that's why I'm here today.
So let's start with talking about property taxes. Obviously, property taxes is a big discussion here in the state of Indiana. I know as we record this conversation, I watched the gubernatorial blank show last night, which was just a total mess and disaster. But one of the issues that popped up was property taxes. So obviously, first of all, what is your plan to address the property tax situation, particularly here in Marion County?
So I think we have to start with a couple of principles, right? If you're over the age of 65, Social Security, your fixed income is not keeping up with your property tax bill. It's not. And so those individuals need stability more than anyone. They can't take on a second job to go and keep up. We really shouldn't be pricing grandma and grandpa out of their own homes. So I think when we look at property tax reform, we either got to really, really expand the exemption when we talk about seniors, or otherwise we need to exempt them entirely. And I think that's a big, and it's a bold proposal, but the reality is that, again, if we don't do something now, we are going to price people out of their homes. And the second side of it is, at the end of the day, too, I think anybody with a homestead needs some stability. When you're buying a home right now in Indianapolis and the rest of Indiana, too, you really don't know what you're getting yourself into, because if assessments rise year over year, even with the caps in place, it's really difficult to project where you're going, which means that when you buy a home, you actually have no idea what the future cost is going to be, even a few years down the road, let alone 20, 30 years.
But one thing, so with property taxes, is the assessments, is how your property tax is assessed, because I jokingly say there are all of 6 people in Indiana who actually understand how property taxes work, and I'm like one-third of one half of them. But if you look at property taxes, a lot of it comes from the assessment situation. And what we had in the past couple of years, in part due to COVID, was a housing shortage of supply, an increase in demand. People weren't moving like they usually do. A lot of folks were staying in place. So I guess my question is, and that's just the free market doing what the free market does. Supply goes up, prices go down, supply goes down, prices go up, simple supply and demand. So I guess my question is, how do you account for assessments with the market forces, that are out there?
Some of it really is that at the end of the day, when these assessments go up, the local government is taking in more money, but you're not really seeing a provision of additional services. So say your assessment goes up, you're under the cap, so you actually have a 20% increase in your total outlay, your bill. The government's not doing 20% more. Your roads aren't 20% better. Your schools aren't 20% better. So why are you spending 20% more? And so, of course, assessments right now are a function of your final bill, but it doesn't have to be that way. At the end of the day, I think that we have to look at ways and how can we cap that. So year over year, your total outlay, how much you're actually spending, particularly if you're looking outside of the referendum context, to make sure that that's not more than 3%, 5%, whatever that number may be, where people, again, have some stability and predictability.
Our guest on the program today is Andrew Ireland. Andrew is a candidate for Congress in the House District 90, that is southeastern Marion County, mostly Franklin Township. And if you look at the township system in Indiana, it's sort of like the old Brady Bunch TV show. So Franklin Township would be where Bobby Brady is in that lower corner there. Andrew, in addition to property tax, you also talk about crime, particularly here in the capital city. What can the legislature realistically do about crime in Indianapolis, apart from a total takeover of the police public safety apparatus?
Well, I think it starts with bringing back accountability to the prosecutor's office here in Indianapolis. I think right now you've got what you call a reform prosecutor, and his idea of reform is let's put the criminals back out on the streets. It's like he wants to play public defender instead of prosecutor. And frankly, that's why we have so many repeat offenders in Indianapolis, as you have individuals who either pled down to minor offenses when they've committed violent acts, or worse yet, they ultimately weren't charged. The charges were dismissed. And again, they're back out on the streets committing similar offenses. I'm sure you saw their case just recently where a man had shot somebody in their home, where 4 months earlier in December, he had done effectively the same act a block away. We can't have cases like that. And at the end of the day, I think it's because we have a prosecutor who isn't willing to do his job. And so in the State House, I think it's giving really the governor the tools to hold guys like that accountable. Now, you can still put a safety net around that to ensure that it's not just used for partisan purposes, because frankly, I don't care if he's a Democrat, a socialist, a libertarian, a Republican, but he has to be willing to enforce the law. He has to be willing to get tough on crime. I think it's the only way we're going to get this under control here in Indianapolis.
So what would your proposal actually be to deal with the Marion County's crime situation?
Well, I would do the exact same thing that Florida has. I would give the governor the ability to suspend a prosecutor who's going to violate his oath of office. And that's certainly what we have here, where not only do you have these individual cases, but there are actually blanket policies on the books of Ryan Mears says he won't enforce X, Y, Z. But that's really not his role. That's the role of the state legislature at the end of the day to decide what the law is. As the prosecutor, your job is to enforce the law.
But on the issue of enforcement, obviously courts have the discretion as to what charges are filed, what you can prove, what you can't prove. People have a right to plea bargain, so to speak. I guess my question is, how do you keep those safeguards in place so you don't have a situation where, let's say you get a Democratic governor and they don't like the Hamilton County prosecutor, or you have a Republican governor and they don't like, they don't like the Lake County prosecutor. How do you keep politics sort of out of it when people sort of exercise their right to vote? And how do you do all this without even changing the Constitution, for that matter?
Well, it may take a constitutional change. I mean, the hope would always be that voters see in November that these guys like Ryan Mears are bad news, that they are not up to the task, that they clearly are violating their oaths of office. But I don't think that means that it should be the only way that you take care of it. And again, at the end of the day, I would like to see a constitutional change where the governor has the tool to do that. And then I think the way you safeguard that, again, is you have an up and down vote in the State House on whether or not to uphold that suspension. A very similar system to what Florida uses, frankly, where maybe it's 2/3, maybe it's a supermajority, whatever that number may be, where you feel sure, fine, 3/4. We'll call it, 6/5, whatever the number is.
6/5 would be like 1 1/5.
That's what I in jest, of course. Yeah. But all of that to say, whatever that number may be, we can negotiate on that. But I think at the end of the day, we need to have those sort of tools in place to at least tell the prosecutors that they don't have total discretion. There is abuse of discretion, just like there is abuse of discretion in a court. A judge can be overturned for, clearly getting it wrong. And I think too many times now we've got a prosecutor who has gotten it wrong.
Our guest on the program today is Andrew Ireland. Andrew is a candidate for the State House, Indiana House Representative, House District 90, which is Franklin Township, which is the southeastern corner of the Marion County. He's running to replace Mike Speedy, who's a candidate for Congress in the 6th Congressional District, so we're happy to have Andrew on the program today. Obviously, education is a big deal in the Indiana General Assembly, whether it's the issue of funding, whether the issue of vouchers, whether the issue of standards. How is, in your opinion, number one, how is education doing here in the state of Indiana? Number two, what would you do to fix or improve on it?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we are falling behind a lot of other states when it comes to education. When you look at even like third grade reading levels, for example, we are far behind our peers. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm a big school choice guy in part because of that, because I think often cookie cutter education really doesn't fit everybody's needs. I was one of them. I went to a charter school in high school. In fact, I was at the first charter school in the state of Indiana, down in southern Indiana. It's called Signature School. I wouldn't be at this microphone today if it wasn't for that. It changed my life. It set me on a path, really, to go to college, to go to law school, to do all the things I've done in my life since. So I think school choice is a really important part of that solution. But two, even in our public schools, we've got to get back to the basics. I think right now we have such a focus on teaching kids about the 1,000 different genders instead of reading and writing, how to do math, how to write in cursive. Talked to a lot of the folks at Doors recently, and they talk about their grandkids or their children. They don't know how to do cursive. They're never going to be able to sign a check or read the Declaration of Independence.
But here's the thing, though, about that. Not to get you off matter. Your check, your signature doesn't have to be in cursive. It just has to be your mark. So you can actually print your name, Andrew Ireland, and that's, for all intents and purposes, your signature. I remember having a conversation with Mike Delph years ago, saying that if you don't teach cursive, people won't be able to read, original documents. Well, the Constitution isn't in cursive; it's in that weird, funky print font.